Welcome to Moxie Bets, presented by Caesars Sportsbook. I'm your host, Katie Mox, and coming up on today's show, we'll dive into my 49ers and find out where bettors are putting their cash on next season for the 49ers, and we'll take a look at a player who has taken the top spot in money spent to win the NFL MVP award. We're going to let you know who that is, and Alabama's Bryce Young looks to become only the second player ever to win the Heisman Trophy twice, but is he the favorite to win it again this year? Stick around and we'll tell you who. But first up, we've got Max Meyer from Caesars Sportsbook, who is an editorial content writer, joining the show today. Max, welcome.
Thanks, Katie. Excited to be on and talk NFL and college football as the seasons for both are nearly underway.
I am so excited to talk to you too. So I read all of your articles, but let everybody know kind of what you do at Caesars Sportsbook and a little bit about your career so they can follow you as well.
Yeah, so basically every day I'm looking at the latest odds and betting action across all sports, and then basically turning that betting data into editorial content. You can read all my articles, and there's 2 new ones every day pretty much on the Caesars website under the Caesars Sportsbook blog. You can follow me on Twitter at the Max Meyer, Meyer. And yeah, I mean, the articles, they really give you the best insights toward the industry in terms of where bettors are looking, why odd shifts are happening, big bets, etc. So yeah, just trying to bring as much coverage as I can.
I love it. And I, of course, read you every single day. We're sponsored by Caesars Sportsbook here, so you're one of our best resources. But what goes into a day in the life of being Max Meyer? Like, what is the level of research that you have to do every day to write these articles?
It's a good amount. I mean, sifting through all the betting data for every single state, and then just, going into our back end and seeing all the odds movements. And then just for additional context, I talked to some of our traders who set the odds and are seeing the action themselves, just because they know so much about these sports. So I think talking with them and getting quotes for the articles is also important. And then it's just combining everything all together and, coming up with these daily articles every day. And during the summer, it's definitely a bit of a challenge with only baseball going on. But luckily, we're in football preview mode now. And so that's been where most of my focus has been of late.
All right, well, we're going to talk to you a little bit later. Stay right there. Max, it's time now for my Mox Thought. All right, people, let's talk about my 49ers here. The Niners have granted Jimmy G permission to seek a trade, so all eyes are on Trey Lance. And the bettors are feeling confident in the young quarterback. According to Caesars, he's racked up over twice as much money to win MVP at plus 6,000. That's more than Aaron Rodgers at plus 1,000 and Patrick Mahomes at plus 800 combined. So, should you put your money on Trey Lance to win the MVP? The answer is no. Don't donate your money to the sportsbooks at plus 6,000. I know it's the sexy pick, and you read a lot of articles, and people make it seem like, Trey Lance is going to be like the second coming of Jesus Christ. The reality is yes, he's going to be our franchise quarterback. We are hopeful that he will be very good, and there will be some signs of that this season, but we don't even know if he's the starting quarterback. I know there's this news that says, Jimmy Garoppolo has finally been granted, permission to leave. They've been trying to get rid of him this whole time. He said goodbye to the fans at the end of last season, and Kyle Shanahan has been very open the entire season about trying to move Jimmy, but that doesn't mean that he's going anywhere. We'll have to see what happens in training camp, if anybody gets injured and where he moves, because if he stays on the Niners, there is a real chance that he could also be the starter for the 49ers this year. And look, Trey Lance only played in 6 games last year. He only started in 2 of them. He went 1-1. Half of the time when he came into play, Jimmy Garoppolo actually drove the ball all the way down the field, and they just gave it to him to give him a touchdown in order to get his spirits up. So no, don't put your money on Trey Lance. I'm hopeful that he'll do good. I'm still a Niners fan, but I'm not putting any money on him at plus 6,000. All right, let's bring Max back in for Book Smart. Max, are you ready to answer some questions about my Niners?
Let's roll.
Let's roll. Okay, first, you heard what I had to say about Trey Lance. You do a deep dive into the 49ers earlier this week. What do you make of the money spent on Trey Lance already with his odds to win MVP? Do you think it's just as ridiculous as I do?
I mean, it's definitely unexpected, but we open Lance's odds at 200 to 1 to win MVP. And this is definitely a quarterback driven award. And anytime you see a potential starting quarterback with odds that high, especially on a good team, just because,
Yeah.
the last like five or so MVPs have all been on the number one seed in their respective conferences, that's definitely going to draw interest from bettors. And then I think an interesting parallel to Lance and Jimmy Garoppolo is when the Chiefs had Alex Smith and traded, all this draft capital to Patrick
Yeah.
Mahomes. And then first year, Smith played most of the games and they let Mahomes, an exciting young talent, paved the way for his second year. And Mahomes, he had pretty long shot odds to begin at MVP, but he just took the league by storm. And he also had a great offensive-minded coach with Andy Reid. He had a lot of weapons with Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. And Lance is definitely set up for success in those regards. Whether,
Yes.
he's actually the real deal is a different question. But he is set up for success, and the 49ers are, at least with their win totals and Super Bowl odds, are expected to be a good team. So there is a path, if Lance does hit the ground running, that he could be a contender for this.
I'll agree with you. And it's interesting to draw that parallel, of course, with Patrick Mahomes. But we were able to see so much more of Patrick Mahomes in college than we saw of Lance. And, that first year, we saw him a little bit. I don't know. I just feel like I haven't seen that much from Lance. We barely saw anything from him in college. And then he just played like a couple games. It's so hard for me to say that he's going to be MVP caliber. But I definitely agree with you that he's set up for success. I mean, he has all of the weapons, he's got a good defense. And the Niners run the ball more than most teams, anyways. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah, and I just think that he has that amount of upside just because, with the amount of quarterback design runs that Shanahan will design and the fact that he is mobile, if Lance runs for 1,000 yards, which is not expected, but in the range of possibilities, I mean,
Yep.
and he leads the Niners to the playoffs, I think that he could definitely be at least in the talk for MVP but actually winning it, he's going to need to put up an all-time performance, like Lamar Jackson is the first name that comes to mind with a dual threat quarterback, but he's won
Right.
MVP. And so, yeah, I mean, Lance, he's young, he's exciting on a good team. There's definitely a shot. And even though he is, getting a lot more action than Aaron Rodgers and Patrick Mahomes,
It's wild.
it's a juicier price for Lance versus,
Yeah.
not getting as much of a payout for either of those former MVP winners.
That's true. Okay, but the Niners actually have 6 players with MVP bets, most of any team. Trey Lance, who we just talked about, Deebo Samuel, Jimmy Garoppolo still in the mix here, George Kittle, Elijah Mitchell, and Nick Bosa. What do you think of those candidates? Obviously, it mostly goes to the quarterback. Jimmy Garoppolo being in this mix is interesting to me.
Yeah, each of those players only have a few MVP bets. However, I just thought it was interesting just because it shows like how well balanced the Niners roster is.
Yes.
The fact that they've gotten all of these players that have gotten MVP bets, and 6 is the most out of any team. And so, Debo, you saw him unleashed on a new level last season with his rushing capability. I mean, George Kittle might not necessarily put up the tight end numbers as a Travis Kelce, but he's such a good blocker and impacts the game so much. Elijah Mitchell, I mean, obviously the 49ers love to run the ball, and Shanahan running backs always do well. And then, Nick Bosa, one of the best pass rushers in the league. Jimmy Garoppolo, I feel like every quarterback gets a bet here and there. So, no, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, they definitely do not have the same level of action as Lance does. And while Lance's odds have dropped, I mean, Deebo Samuel's MVP odds have gone up considerably. We opened him at 40 to 1, and now he's all the way at 100 to 1. And it's just, it's a quarterback award, and I think bettors are shy to back running backs and wide receivers even after how, Jonathan Taylor and Cooper Kupp and Debo to an extent performed last season.
I agree. So question actually, because I've never actually bet on someone that could potentially move. Let's say you bet on Jimmy Garoppolo as a 49er and then he moves to, I don't know, the Colts or somewhere else, which it's not going to be the Colts. Does that bet still stand because it's just Jimmy Garoppolo as a person, or does it become voided out after he changes teams?
Yep, bet still stands. Especially with Garoppolo, I mean, we kind of, and with the movement with Lance, I mean, the market is suggesting that Lance is going to be the starting quarterback, and there's a decent chance that Garoppolo ends up at a different team. And so that price, what you get it at, is locked in no matter what.
Okay, so let's talk about the Niners' record here. Right now, they're 16 to 1 odds to win the Super Bowl. But according to Caesars, there have been more bets placed on the 49ers to finish with the worst record at 125 to 1 than to finish with the best record, which is 15 to 1. In fact, there have been no bets placed on them to have the best record when 20 other teams have drawn at least one wager for that. Do you expect the Niners to get more love as we get closer to the start of the season? It's interesting to me that they would have 6 players in line for MVP getting bets, but not a good record. How does that make sense?
I just think with the 49ers, you look at their Super Bowl odds, they're 16 to 1, they're near the top of the board, but this is the one team that doesn't have a superstar quarterback already. Like, I mean, Bills, you have Josh Allen,
Yep.
Bucks, Brady, Packers, Rodgers, Chiefs, Mahomes, and all of them, like through 20 to 1 with Lamar and the Ravens, like all of them have superstar
Yep.
quarterbacks. And, love it or hate it, it is a quarterback driven league. And I think there is that uncertainty. And then also with the 49ers schedule, they play the AFC West. And while the NFC South isn't necessarily a strong division, they still play the Buccaneers. Right. So you have 4 great AFC West teams. You have the Buccaneers, you have the Rams and the Cardinals in the NFC West. It's a pretty daunting schedule. And so at 15 to 1, their odds their odds are pretty low. And with the fact that they play all of these top tier teams, I think that's maybe why bettors are being scared away, along with the uncertainty of Lance. And then with worst record, 125 to 1. I mean, considering the Seahawks
Come
are in that
on.
division too,
Yes.
it's tough to imagine. But the 49ers were only a couple years removed from that 3-13
Okay,
team.
under Jim Tom Sula. Come on, give us some credit here.
So I guess just grasping at straws, but I don't know. It's interesting, but bettors will always, see those bigger prices, especially triple digits. And I don't see it necessarily in the range of outcomes, but anything can happen in the NFL. And the Niners with their roster, it's hard to envision it just because if they have a couple of injuries, they are, pretty well stacked at several other positions versus other teams might be more quarterback reliant like the Chiefs. But just interesting to me that the Niners haven't gotten a best record yet, Ben. But I get it. I get with the schedule.
I may be the first one to put that in today, just for the good juju here. It's so interesting, bettors' behavior though, because like you said, they don't have the star quarterback like some of these other teams have. Yet people are putting so much money on Lance to win the MVP. So if they think that he could win the MVP, then he's got to be that star quarterback that's going to take the Niners to the best record. Now, I don't think the same bettor is betting on these two things, but it's very interesting to see the different bettor behavior.
Yeah, I just think when Lance was 200 to 1 and then we had him, 150 to 1 and 100 to 1, those are much better and more exciting prices than the Niners, with Super Bowl 14 to 1, 60 to 1. It's a much bigger payout. Best records 15 to 1. Their win total is high with 10 wins. You're getting a long shot price with the focal point of the team versus the rest of the team is priced like one of the better teams in the NFL.
Right. Okay, so let's take a look at the NFC West as a whole. So the odds right now, Rams are at plus 135 to win the NFC West, Niners plus 180, Cardinals plus 300, and the Seahawks plus 1,600. Where would you put your money for the NFC West? I think it's going to be the Rams, right?
I mean, I'm pretty low on the Cardinals, just because the Cardinals have one of the toughest schedules. I'm sure that I feel like I've been seeing this everywhere, and this is what the public's been seeing too. But with Cliff Kingsbury teams, they tend to start quicker and then fade down the stretch. I mean, the Cardinals were the last undefeated team last season, and Kyler Murray at one point was the NFL MVP favorite at Caesars last season. But the Cardinals, I mean, they've lost some key players this offseason. Their defense, I'm a little skeptical on it. Definitely not as strong as the Rams and the 49ers. But the Rams, that they have the Super Bowl, they're the Super Bowl champions. They added Bobby Wagner in the offseason. I mean, the Stafford and Kupp and Cam Akers, even though he wasn't that great in the postseason last year, he was coming off record time for an ACL injury. And so you'd think with more rest that he'd be more effective. But yeah, I mean, with Rams and 49ers, I think both of the rosters are really good. But with the difference in price, you get Stafford, who's a, future Hall of Fame quarterback, you would presume, versus Lance, who's a mystery box at quarterback. And I think that alone is worth the price. And McVay and Shanahan are both good coaches. These are both good rosters, but I think that's the difference. And that's why the Rams are the slight favorite over the Niners in the division.
So you said you're not that hot on the Cardinals, and I totally agree with you. I mean, they do fall apart in the second half of the season. They're not going to have DeAndre Hopkins for the first 6 games. But what about that deal that Murray just got, making him the second highest paid quarterback in the league right now? Have you seen any odds change, or people feeling more confident or less confident now that he's making a lot of money, or it's pretty much stayed the same?
There usually really aren't any odd shifts when it comes to player extensions. Maybe if it's like re-signing a player, like I guess with the Packers this offseason with Aaron Rodgers, like we were unsure whether Rodgers would remain a Packer, but once it came out that he would stay in Green Bay, then their odds shifted. But with Murray, like there were rumors in the beginning of the offseason that he might have been unhappy in Arizona, but we didn't necessarily move off of anything. I don't. There weren't any like serious, pursuits, like maybe like in a different sport, like a Kevin Durant, making that trade request for the Nets and us hearing about the Suns and the Heat. There wasn't anything really substantial with the Murray rumors, and so we didn't move off of anything, and we didn't get any bets, with potential Kyler Murray destinations and people, trying to get out in front of that.
He's going to have to play really well this year. That's a lot of money. I mean, I think there's a lot of people that think he's maybe a little bit overpaid. I don't know. I mean, we'll have to see how he does this year, but they better do better in the playoffs if they're going to pay him that much money. The second highest paid quarterback is crazy to me for Kyler Murray.
And the Cardinals, I mean, they don't have a very good offensive line. Like you said, DeAndre Hopkins, his top wideout, is suspended for the first part of the season. Christian Kirk is now a Jaguar, and he was a safety net for Kyler. Just a lot of questions, I think, with the Cardinals. And they definitely have the offensive talent. I mean, Kyler is just so exciting to watch. And the fact that he can break a game open with his arm or his legs, not that many quarterbacks can do that. But there's just so many other questions with the Cardinals. And considering how strong the rosters are top to bottom with the Rams and the 49ers, the Cardinals are for me, a clear third in that division. And the odds reflect that.
Okay, I agree with you there. So let's talk a little college football now. We touched on this on Wednesday earlier this week. Alabama is the favorite to win the national title, but outside of Bama, where else are bettors putting their money?
So for college football national title, it's been a clear big two. It's been Alabama and Ohio State. Ohio State actually opened with the third lowest odds. They were behind Bama originally and then Georgia. But the amount of action that's been on Ohio State and Alabama compared to Georgia, the defending national champion, it's been pretty surprising. Like Alabama has over 6 times the money to win the national championship than Georgia does. Ohio State has almost 5 times the money. And I guess bettors tend to, lean toward the high-powered offenses versus a strong defense like Georgia had last season, even though they have to replace a lot of their starters from that team that won it all.
Yeah.
But I mean, Ohio State was the number 1 offense last season. Alabama has, the defending Heisman Trophy winner in Bryce Young. These two teams are stacked on that side of the ball. Georgia, they have Stetson Bennett, the fourth, and they have a lot of weapons. But this wasn't a high-powered offense. It was their defense that really carried them. And so I think bettors, they see that Ohio State and Alabama can put up 50 points on any team, and they get excited about that. And even defensively, I mean, Alabama returns Will Anderson Jr., who's now tied for fourth lowest in our Heisman odds at 30-1, which is crazy for a defensive player. But he and Aiden Hutchinson were the 2 best defensive players in the country last season, arguably. And so, Alabama has all this talent on both sides of the ball. Ohio State does too. Ohio State's defense really struggled in some big games last season, but just
Michigan,
Michigan, and when they lost to Oregon, and even in the Rose Bowl against Utah, they gave up 42 points. They just scored 45.
Yeah.
So if Ohio State can take that next, if all that talent can gel together and they can become, stronger on defense, then I think they're a viable shot. And the Big Ten definitely isn't as strong as the SEC. But Ohio State has the path to make the playoff. And with C.J. Stroud, who's the Heisman favorite, Jackson Smith-Njigba, and Travion Henderson, that's as good of a quarterback, wide receiver, running back combo there is in the country.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm on Bama for this one. It's just so hard to bet against them. I'm not hot on Georgia either. I agree with a lot of bettors here because they lost. I think they lost the most out of any college team in terms of their starters from last year, and it's hard to say that they're going to be able to fill those spots, especially on the defense. I do think at plus 180, these are probably the best odds that you'll get for Alabama as the season starts and they start winning like we know that they can. Those are likely to drop. Do you think that this would be the best odds for Bama right now, or would you rather wait and see how the season goes? Do you think there might be something better?
It's tough just because so at plus 180, I looked this up when I was writing the college football title odds and trends article yesterday. These are the second lowest preseason odds over the past decade for a title
Interesting.
favorite. Yeah,
Yeah.
in 2018, Alabama opened the season at plus 175, and they ended up losing that year to Clemson in the national title game. But at plus 180, I mean, it's tough to say there is value compared to
Yeah.
the other prices,
True.
compared to other preseason title favorites. But I mean, Alabama is being talked as a generational team. Their win totals at 11, and even if they make the SEC championship game and they're undefeated and they lose to Georgia, we've seen in the past where an SEC team that loses in their conference title game make it to the playoff and even win the national title. So with Bryce Young and Will Anderson and Nick Saban and all that talent and all the money they spend on their 50-person coaching staff or whatever, I mean Alabama just they're an incredibly loaded team. But in terms of plus 180, I think that there may be other ways to attack this because I just think that the price is so
Yeah.
small. And, with
Yeah.
college football, there only being 12 regular season games, all you need is one bad game or one injury to really break, for things to break the wrong way. And so I wouldn't necessarily
Yeah.
be backing Alabama at that low of a price right now.
What is their win total set at right now? If that's at 11, I mean, I think over that could be potentially a good bet to make.
Yeah, so their over is their juice is high, it's highly toward the over just
Oh,
because
yeah.
betters are mostly going to be like obviously Alabama has a much better chance of winning 12 games than 10 games with this team, and you have the
Yeah.
safety net of 11. But I just think with at least with Alabama versus Georgia, we actually have Georgia's win total at 11 and a half. But
Ooh, interesting.
their under is heavily favored. But just
Mm,
because their schedule being in the opposite SEC division as Alabama, their schedule is easier.
mm.
Georgia's projected to be a double-digit favorite in pretty much every game. I mean, in week one, they're playing a top 25 team in Oregon, and they're an 18-point favorite. So
Wow.
Georgia's schedule definitely sets up nicely. And even though they're not getting the same love for national titles as Alabama and Ohio State, they're still well-positioned to at least make the college football playoff.
What about long shots? Are there any long shot picks that are drawing in big bets? I've seen some buzz about Utah State.
Yeah, so Utah State's definitely interesting. I mean, they won the Mountain West Conference last season. They return a good amount of starters. Their coach, Blake Anderson's really good. They have a quarterback, Logan Bonner, who lit it up for them last season, too. And we opened them at 1,000 to 1. But Caesars, we got three separate $1,000 bets on Utah 1,000 to 1 to win the title. So all of
Ooh,
those pay out $1 million if Utah
wow.
State were to do it. And Utah State, early in the season, they play Alabama, and we have those odds up for that game. And Utah State is a 38-point underdog to the Crimson Tide. But at least they have that high-profile non-conference game where if they are able to shock the world and beat Alabama, and they can run the table, they have an argument where they beat one of the supposed best teams in the country and going undefeated when it's really hard to go undefeated in college football. And there were a couple bettors that were like at 1,000 to 1. Why not? Let's risk it all. So definitely an interesting storyline, and the fact that there are only 4 teams that have more $1,000 bets to win the title than Utah State is really interesting to me.
Well, we know that Caesars will be rooting against Utah to win the whole thing with those 3 potential $1 million payouts. That is crazy. So let's talk about the Heisman Trophy winner. So Bryce Young is set to become, or looks to become at least, only the second player to win the Heisman twice. Though he's one of the favorites to win it, he's not the player getting the most money to win it. Who would that be?
So that's Ohio State quarterback C.J. Stroud. And actually, we moved Young
Ah,
yesterday from plus 375 to plus 400. It's been kind of
Ooh,
surprising that Young has not been getting as much money. Like, he's not even in the top 10 in Heisman handle at Caesars, which,
it's
given
crazy.
that all the money that's being bet on Alabama, and he is the quarterback and the reigning Heisman winner, you would expect that he would. But I guess, history's not on his side. Only one other player, Archie Griffin for Ohio State in the 70s, has won the Heisman twice. The last player that did win the Heisman and came back the following season was Lamar Jackson. And Jackson
Hmm.
put up amazing numbers the following season at Louisville, but he still finished in third to Baker Mayfield and Bryce Young that year in the Heisman voting. I just think with there to be a repeat winner with the Heisman, Young just has to be head and shoulders above everyone else. And,
Right.
CJ Stroud has that offensive firepower. He's a great talent too. He hasn't won. And now, so Stroud is the favorite at plus 200, despite opening as the second choice at 350. And Bryce Young's gone from plus 250 to plus 400. So I just think that people might be a little nervous to back
Yeah.
someone who's won it before, winning it back to back, even though we are seeing it more in sports, albeit professional sports. But, Aaron Rodgers won back-to-back MVPs in NFL. Nikola Jokic won back-to-back MVPs in NBA.
Right.
Shohei Ohtani is in decent position to win back-to-back AL MVPs in baseball. It's different in college, but I just think that
Yep.
we are seeing more back-to-back MVP winners, and I'm interested to see if that translates to the college level at all. But we'll see if Young can perform.
Yeah, I'm interested in that as well. All right, Max, thank you so much for joining our show today. Let people know where they can find your articles and also where to find you on social media.
Yeah, so you can, if you look up the Caesars Sportsbook blog, it's on the Caesars website, and you can see the daily articles, with up-to-date odds and trends for every angle imaginable for all the big sports. And then social media, I'm at the Max Meyer. You can follow Caesars Sportsbook Twitter account at Caesars Sports. And they do a great job, obviously, with all my information and all the other big bets that come in. And they're just we're a fun follow in general. So those would be the two accounts.
I would agree. A fun follow in general. Max, thanks so much. Can't wait to have you back.
Thanks, Katie. Appreciate it.
All right, now it's time to get into my Mox Locks, my three best bets for the MLB slate tonight. I'm looking at the Yankees versus the Orioles. I'm taking the under 9 runs. This is at minus 120 on Caesars Sportsbook. You got Tyone. He is 10-2 with a 3.86 ERA. He threw for just over 6 innings against the Boston Red Sox, giving up only 1 earned run and allowing 3 hits. On the other side, we've got Tyler Wells. He's 7-5 with a 3.38 ERA. He did give up 3 runs in the first 5 and some change innings versus the Rays in his last start. But a big reason why I like this under and why the Orioles have been so successful is their bullpen has been pretty good. They actually have the 4th ranked bullpen ERA in majors with a 3.14, and the Yankees are the 2nd with a 2.90 team ERA. I just think that both of these bullpens are super strong, and the Yankees tend to have lower scoring games, and by that I mean not necessarily in the double digits within the first round of a series. So I like this game to go under the 9 runs. Next up, I am looking at the Phillies versus the Cubs. I'm taking Christopher Morel over 0.5 total bases. This is at minus 141. He's been pretty impressive this year. In only 55 games so far, he has a .266 batting average, 36 runs, 9 home runs, and 26 RBIs, and 8 stolen bases. He's up against Kyle Gibson tonight for the Phillies, who has a 4.35 ERA. I just think it's a good spot for Christopher to get at least 1 base tonight. But I am going to take the Phillies money line versus the Cubs. This is at minus 130. The Phillies are on a hot streak right now. They've won 3 in a row, and the Cubs are still the Cubs. They're continuing to skid here. They've lost 11 of their last 14 games. Despite Gibson's less than impressive ERA, which I just mentioned in my last bet, he has been getting better as of late. Steele, on the other hand, has just really struggled on the road. He is 0-2 in 6 away games with a 5.86 ERA on the road. So to recap, I'm taking the Yankees and the Orioles under 9 runs. That's at minus 120. I'm taking Christopher Morel over 0.5 total bases tonight at minus 141. And the Phillies money line versus the Cubs at minus 130. This has been Moxie Bets presented by Caesars Sportsbook.